Welcome to Warehouse Women, a podcast where we talk about commercial real estate, building businesses, and passive income, but most importantly, turning barriers into strengths. Tell me more about okay, you realized you didn't prepare for that financial freedom you were looking for. How did you go about figuring out what financial freedom meant to you and how you were going to kind of shift into that new gear for creating that financial freedom instead of just creating massive cash flow?
Okay, so I probably going to get vulnerable here, right? My partner is a software engineer and he was not on board. So it took quite a long time for him to, he's a prove it to me guy. And so when taxes would come in and their taxes were deferred after I purchased my first rental property in 2007 or 8, even then he was kind of well, that's just a fluke, right? And so it took a lot of time. And, a lot of people have partners that are not on board. And all I can say is just be patient and confident. You have to just go for what you want. I think the bottom line was I was relying, okay, I'm going to be a chick here. I was sort of relying on my husband's, all of his inventions that he was creating in software to fund our financial wealth. And then when I realized it doesn't matter because I have so much tax to pay, one of the issues was we had to write $1 million check one year to IRS, and that talk about, oh my God, talk about how painful, and I wanted to throw up, and how many zeros is that, and you've got to be kidding. And I tried everything possible. That's when I realized I have to buy and hold. Doesn't make any sense.
Thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing that. I'm sure there's a lot of people who can relate to your story about relying on their partner, or I know there's a lot of people who talk about when you're on that growth journey and finding that sometimes there's periods of loneliness you have to go through to find out what's really important to you and to just execute on it. And then when you come out the other side, it's okay, I'm not going to let someone else's opinion take away from what I want from my life. So thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing that. And
you're welcome, Mac. I know you have a new partner, and all of these issues will come up. Just because you have a loving and fantastic partner doesn't mean that they always agree with you. So it seems so simple, but it's you want to be happy, so you kind of submit to whatever they want, and that's not cool. You got to stick with your dreams.
Yeah. Actually, this is a little bit of an aside, but I love listening to Alex and Layla Hormozi's content around businesses, partnerships, and relationships. I think it's really unorthodox and contrarian, and I may not agree with everything that they say, but I definitely think it's interesting, and it helps kind of push, at least my brain to reevaluate. Is this truly what I want? Okay, it is. All right, good. We're good, So
absolutely
any of their content, but
yeah. No, that's not a side point at all. I think it's really critical, and this gets back to why I wrote the book and what my goal is to empower women, get them. I mean, it's such a cliche to say empower, but I mean to get them comfortable with very male industry of construction. They're intimidating, and that's on purpose sometimes. And they are tough to work with sometimes. Different cultures have different deep-seated resistance for women. So, you just have to work through each single item as it comes up in the construction project.
I want to touch more on the empowering women and how that was part of your book. One thing that I loved about reading your book is every time you would be talking about an investor or someone, you always use the pronoun her. And it caught me by surprise the first few times that I was reading it. And I was like, it's so nice that, the default in this book is her instead of his. It's such a little thing.
But isn't it? Yeah. And I mean, so many times we say he or him all the time. And I got a lot of pushback, from guys going, "Hey, is this, what about us?" And I'm like, absolutely, go for it. It's an excellent book, read it. But what's ironic is that they're assuming the he pronoun is the right way, and it could be she. So you just have to be super careful about that. And it was difficult for me to challenge that in the book because it is so male dominated.
Hmm. It's interesting, like it is very male dominated, but for us females who are in this space, some of the best like construction project managers I've worked with have been females. Um, and it's really interesting the deeper you get in, how many woman companions you can find within the space. It's still very male dominated. I'm not going to argue that fact. That
Yeah,
is just a fact of
yeah,
what it is. But there's a lot more women inside the industry than one would realize. Um, and
yeah. They're getting more and more comfortable, Mahek, and I just love it. I just love it. And
no, and you're
I want some of us that have been in the industry a long time, like even Ashley Wilson,
Mhm.
to step up. And I quoted her in the book. I mean, she's just phenomenal. She's so smart, so freaking smart. And so I love it when other women are in the public empowering other women, because that's the diversity that needs to be done. That's the diversity that needs to be done. And especially what I'm talking about is construction. Construction is just like old school. It's the good old boys. And so I'm not trying to bash men, because you really need the guys. It's something I'm torn with. You want to empower women, but at the same time, you need strong male teams, because after all, I'm not gonna be as physically strong as maybe a guy would. So it's just, you have to keep those relationships alive. It's super important to reward and appreciate and raise up your team as well as other women at the same time.
I feel like that brings us into leadership perfectly. One, like, how do you see women coming into the construction field more? I know you've mentioned it slightly in your book, but if you wouldn't mind going into it here, how do you lead teams of people? Where do you believe that maybe women have these leadership qualities, maybe men do as well, to really lead the construction team in order to fulfill the vision that has been created?
Well, for me, I believe if a woman looks at the end result, how am I going to get from point A, my 5 units I have, to really scaling? And in order for someone to scale, whether it's residential or commercial, you have to get super comfortable with construction. And I guess really that maybe going to job sites, maybe just walking around and talking to, if they have no experience at all, talking with GCs. And a lot of the GCs are very open to conversations with women about, how would a woman get involved? Interviewing other female contractors, as rare as we are, that's another opportunity. You have to almost see, you can't get offended easily, because there's a lot of offensive things that happen when you're in a construction project, and you have to kind of rise above that and follow and watch and see what's going on, and don't be afraid to ask questions. I think the joy is finding relationships that really will help you through. For instance, I have a plumber. He's fantastic. He's very open to women GCs or women in construction. And so I always ask him stupid questions, because being a general, you have a very general, broad scope of construction. But if I have a very narrow question, you got to ask. You can't be afraid, or you can't act macho. When I first started, I was very bravissimo, and I talk about that in the book. Very bravissimo. I can't even pronounce it, but I wanted to be tough, and I wanted to hang with the guys, and that's really not where I was very successful, but in retrospect, it was too stressful. It wasn't me. And so the more I became me in the mix, asking inspectors questions, um, you know, calling guys out on something in a my own way, not macho and cut them off at the knees, but really confront in my own style. Um, Giving them the opportunity to sound off, and not sound off in a bad way, but just really say, hey, this is why I did this. Oh, and then you get to respond back why. So in the process, you learn it's constant contrast is the word I want to use. So you're constantly experience contrast in these relationships with other subs and generals. And it's as a woman, you have to, it's not easy. You have to have thick skin and just keep asking, keep pushing forward. um, it doesn't matter what people think of you. You just got to go for it.
I'm loving so many things you just said. I'm going to start by highlighting what I think was the biggest thing that I did not expect to hear from you was that you should not be macho. That like in the beginning you started out being macho, but that wasn't the best way to lead. And how leaning into your personal style, asking questions, like leaning into that leadership piece of not just assuming and judging, but like leading from curiosity and like learning and like when
Yes.
needed, doing what you have to do. But that is, I think, such a highlight point that I'm really glad that you were able to share that with us.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, yeah. No, I just I had a lot of names attached to me. Dragon Lady. There's all the B words. I didn't care. I was just like, all I wanted was get to the end result, get to the finish line. And you do really have to have thick skin in a lot of ways. And then once you continue to hire the same team, even if they push back when you first start, because they're like, oh yeah, this is a newbie, um, you will earn the respect. It's just like any other job or business you're in. You start to earn their respect, and then they go to bat for you. They will, as long as you have a good relationship. So it's really magical in many, many ways. And I could not be more grateful for my construction career over all these years. I just love it. I just love it. The business I created, the relationships I created. And I think there's other women that will feel so much freedom if they can open wide that construction management piece and become super comfortable.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend, and I'll see you next week.